आवाज आ रही है जैनम भाई आपकी? कैमरा स्टार्ट करो।
यस 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 यस
विराग अभी प्रेजेंटेशन मत स्टार्ट कर रहा।
नहीं नहीं जैनम भाई,
हाँ हाँ बताइए बताइए।
so good evening friends. Today we have a second day. We have a CA Jainam Shah, practicing chartered accountant, specialized and working mainly focus on field of Ind AS. Earlier he has worked with Deloitte for around 3.5 years in assurance division. He has carried out Ind AS converged assignment of various industries such as manufacturing, real estate, NBFC, oil and gas. He has taken various sessions on the topic of Ind AS at Ahmedabad branch as well as study circles. With this brief introduction, would like to give a charge to Abhishek. He will address something about the network, and after that we will start the session.
Yeah, thank you, Virag. Once again, welcome all the members, and especially welcome CA Jainam Shah, as well as TC Bafna sir, JCF president. So basically, our motto of network is to how our members get the maximum benefit through networking. So our main motto is to knowledge sharing as well as various kind of opportunity sharing. So we are coming with a few more webinar series, like especially for GST, COVID impact in GST and ITC from Monday and Tuesday 2 days, and for advanced Excel training program for 3 days for chartered accountant, especially for MIS reporting and auditing tools. And tomorrow we are having a great mega event with Dr. Girish Ahuja sir on recent amendment on income tax. So I request all the members to please register for tomorrow's event because that is free for all the members. I am requesting now.
Hello.
हेलो।
Voice is not coming.
Yes,
आवाज
Jainam
नहीं आ रही है,
bhai,
ears not hearing.
Bafna ji, you can
यस
start.
यस यस आई कैन हियर यू।
I'm not hearing.
शैल आई?
Hello.
हेलो हेलो।
Yes, Jainam bhai, you can start the session.
Yeah.
ओके शैल आई?
I think it started now.
Okay.
So you guys are is my screen
So
is
once
visible to
again,
everyone?
I would like to welcome you all. Let me introduce our today's speaker, Jainam bhai. Jainam bhai is a practicing chartered accountant from Ahmedabad. He is a product of Big Four. He has worked around 4 years in Deloitte and has experience in assurance department and has taken maximum assignment of Ind AS related in the various industries such as manufacturing, real estate, NBFC, oil and gas, and has taken number of sessions at Ahmedabad branch and study circles. With this introduction, would like to request Abhishek to take a few words and we can start the session thereafter.
Yes, thank you, Virag. Once again, welcome all the members and especially welcome CA Jainam Shah, today's speaker, and CA TC Bafna sir, our JCF president. So, friends, we are having this network just for only for members to get the benefited through various kind of opportunities and knowledge sharing activities. So, we are coming with a few more webinars on advanced Excel training program as well as recent impact of COVID impact on GST provisions and ITC. So for 2 days program is for GST Monday, Tuesday, and 3 days Excel training program 6, 7, 8 May. And tomorrow we are having a mega event with Dr. Girish Ahuja sir on recent amendment on income tax. So I request all the members to please join for tomorrow's events. Now I request TC Bafna sir to say a few words about our network and program.
Hello, hearing?
Yes, sir.
Hello, are you hearing?
Yes, Bafna.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Hearing, yeah. Most welcome to Janam Shah, the speaker for this accounting standard and NBFC, and JCF members and viewers from the JCF New Bombay are welcome to all of the this viewer this session of this accounting standards. Now this is I request to the Janam Shah to can start the process session. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you, Bafna ji. Janam bhai, please start the session.
Thank you. Yeah, let us start.
My screen is visible to everybody.
Yes, yes, your screen is visible.
Okay, so I just brief about the today's session that we are having a session on applicability of Ind AS to NBFC. So why this topic is particularly taken in this series? So just to give a brief about this, that NBFCs are going to Ind AS is going to applicable to NBFCs in recent years only. Initially, when Ind AS was applicable to other corporates, at that time MCA and ministry level have separately banks and NBFC they have excluded from the applicability of Ind AS. But in these 2 years, phase 1 and phase 2, they have started started Ind AS applicability to NBFC also. So here we are considering the brief is the what all are the Ind AS which are going to affect the NBFCs and how those NBFCs financial statements are going to get affected. Okay, so first I will start with the coverage that what do we mean by the NBFC. So as per the Companies Act, Companies Ind AS rules, non-banking financial company means the non-banking financial company as defined in clause F of section 45I of the Reserve Bank of India. So Companies Ind AS rules draws the attention towards the Reserve Bank India definition what is given under the 45I section. So what it says that NBFC covers what kind of entities? So housing finance entities, microfinance entities, merchant banking companies, nidhi companies, venture capital funds, chit fund companies, mutual benefit companies, that is the mutual funds also, and stockbroker, sub-broker companies, and none other than securitization and asset reconstruction companies. So these are the companies which, as per the definition of NBFC given under RBI, Reserve Bank of India Act, under clause F of section 45, these all companies are covered as an NBFC. So for applicability of Ind AS to all these companies, we have to consider this roadmap that have been prescribed by the ICI and MCA also. So talking about the roadmap, that Ministry of Corporate Affairs on it in its press release dated 18th January 2016 has prescribed the roadmap for implementation of NBFC as follows. So the applicability is in the phased manner. So there are mainly two phases in which NBFCs are going to affected by Ind AS. Talking about the first phase, all those NBFCs which are having net worth of 500 crores or more, they have to apply Ind AS with effect from 1st April 2018. So 18-19 was the year for them for the purpose of initial applicability or initial application of the Ind AS. So all the NBFCs having net worth of 500 crores or more, they have to apply Ind AS with effect from 1st April 2018. Next is the holding companies, subsidiary companies, joint ventures, and associated companies of those which are already covered under initial phase. That is, the companies are 500 crores or more net worth companies. So if my company is having a 500 crore or more net worth, and I'm falling under this phase 1, then all the group entities that is my holding company, my subsidiary companies, my JVs and associates, they are also required to follow Ind AS under phase 1 only. So for them also applicability is the 1st April 2018. Now talking about the phase 2, which is the current year, that is 1920 just passed, for which we are going to conduct the audit or the accounts which we are going to finalize. That all the NBFCs whose equity or debts are listed on the stock exchange or in the process of listing, whether in India or outside India, whether or not they were, their assets are net assets are exceeding 500 crore or more. So in first phase, if you see, all the NBFCs having assets of 500 crore or more are only considered. They have not considered the all the listed entities. But in second phase, all the listed NBFCs are covered for the purpose of applicability of Ind AS. So for them, the effective date for the purpose of Ind AS application is 1st April 2019. Now talking about the unlisted entities. So if my with then for them Ind AS is applicable from 1st April 2019 on if and only if my net assets are 250 crore or more but less than 500 crore. If the assets are more than 500 crore, then I have to fall under the then I have to follow Ind AS under phase 1, that is 1st April 2018. But my assets are less than 500 crore but higher than 250 crore, then I have to follow Ind AS with effect from 1st April 2019. And similarly, which we discussed in the under phase 1, that holding company, subsidiary company, JV and associate of point 1 and 2, that is all the listed entities and net entities having net worth of 250 to 500 crore, all those companies are also supposed to follow Ind AS with effect from 1st April 2019. So there are certain clarifications which were given under that circular of applicability, that this criteria has to be evaluated based on the standalone financial statement of the company and not the consolidated financial statement of the company. Second one is, on satisfying this criteria, Ind AS is applicable to standalone as well as consolidated financial statements of the company. So for the purpose of evaluation of criteria, I have to check the individual balance sheet, that is the standalone balance sheet. But once it is applicable, I have to follow Ind AS for both standalone as well as consolidated financial statement. Now the third one is, on the applicability, company need to restate comparative figures also as if Ind AS was applicable with effect from first date of preceding accounting period. So if we talk about the current year, that is 1920, which just completed. So if my company is falling under phase 2, for which Ind AS is required to applicable, or for which Ind AS is required to follow with effect from 1st April 19, for those entities they have to apply Ind AS and present financial statement as if it is applicable with effect from 1st April 2018. So 1st April 2018 is the transition date for those entities, and with effect from 1920 year, they have to follow Ind AS. So they have to recast or restate all the figures of previous financial statements as if Ind AS were applicable in that period also. Now, if we talk about the voluntary adoption, then it has been specifically mentioned that Ind AS they cannot adopt in for area. Companies Accounting Standard Rules 2006, which are not following home area. Hello.
जैनम भाई कंटिन्यू करो आप. हेलो
Jainam bhai, we can hear you.
जैनम भाई.
So now we take the example that ABC Company Limited is an unlisted NBFC having net worth of 80 crores as at March 31, 2019. ABC Company Limited is a subsidiary company of XYZ Limited, which is not an NBFC company to which Ind AS are applicable. So in this case, what we are supposed to do, so whether Ind AS are applicable to ABC company with effect from 1st April 2019 or not. So no, voluntarily I cannot apply for the purpose of Ind AS application because my net worth is not more than 250 crore. It is 80 crores only. If not, how XYZ Company Limited will consolidate financials of ABC Company Limited while preparing consolidated financials for the year financial 1920. So as I mentioned that I have to prepare two sets of financial statement, one for the purpose of consolidation and one for the purpose of my regular reporting, that is under IGAAP. So for the purpose of consolidation, I have to prepare accounts under Ind AS, and for the purpose of regular reporting, I have to prepare accounts under IGAAP. Moving towards the another illustration. PQR Limited has applied for its registration as an NBFC to RBI, which is not yet granted. So PQR Limited are under process of getting registered as an NBFC. So PQR Limited has issued its debenture in the month of July, which are listed on the stock exchange. So they have the debentures which are listed on the stock exchange, but they do not have this registration as an NBFC. In this case, having net worth more than 380 crores, whether Ind AS is applicable to me, that is the question. So whether company needs to publish its half yearly financial statements as per the Ind AS or regular financial IGAAP. So as part 3 of schedule 3 is the framework applicable to Ind AS. So company have to prepare their accounts as per Ind AS only. The reason being the company which is carrying on the activity of NBFC but not registered with RBI will also be subject to the roadmap of the Ind AS applicability. This has been clarified under ITFG Bulletin 13 that though you are not a registered NBFC, but you are carrying activity as per carrying activity which are in the nature of NBFC. So even though you are not registered, Ind AS are applicable to you if you are fulfilling those phase 1 or phase 2 criteria. Now SB limit illustration 3, this is also related to the applicability criteria that SB Limited is a registered stockbroker and has applied for the purpose of termination of its license. In earlier example, we discussed that we are in the process of registration. In this example, we are discussing that we are in the process of termination of the license, which has not been approved as on balance sheet date. Whether SB Limited shall follow the roadmap as roadmap prescribed for NBFC? No, as the activity has been discontinued, mere the license or mere the registration or the cancellation formalities activity. So activity of NBFC license and to follow this continued the activity of the discontinued the carrying out the activities of Ind AS or NBFCs. Though my license is active, I am not supposed to follow Ind AS. So this has been clarified under those ITFG bulletins only. Now, we are talking about the major impacts. So here what I have done that I have summarizes which all are the major impacts which are going to affect the NBFCs as far as the IGAAP versus Ind AS is concerned. So what kind of account balances that are going to get affected because of the applicability of Ind AS, and what kind of adjustments they are required to pass in the books of account so as to make their books compliant with the Ind AS. So the first one is the recognition of interest income and expenses based on the effective interest rate method. So under IGAAP, what kind of treatment we are following till now is that transaction costs that are incurred to obtain loans are charged to the statement of P&L upfront or over a period of loan tenure, and transaction costs that are charged from the customer while granting them loans are recognized in the statement of P&L upfront. So whatever transaction cost we are incurring for the purpose of borrowing or for the purpose of granting loans, that we are charging upfront to the P&L statement under IGAAP. But under Ind AS, what we are going to do is that considering considering these transaction cost, this transaction cost will form part of my effective interest rate, and it will be amortized over a period of time based on the effective interest rate that we are going to determine. So considering this transaction cost as income, so both side income and expense. So for the loans that I have granted to my customers and the loans that I have borrowed, so whatever expense I have incurred or whatever expenses or whatever charges I am getting from my customers, that will be recognized through statement of P&L over a tenure of the loan in the effective interest rate method instead of the upfront charging it to the statement of P&L, which we used to follow under IGAAP. So now, what kind of example of these transaction costs? So the examples are the processing fee, upfront fees, commission, etc., which are paid or recovered at the time of getting or granting the loan. So another example is any premium payable on redemption of debenture or preference share that is charged to against the treatment we now under Ind AS, this premium considered as a finance cost. Finance, it will be amortized over a period of time through effective interest rate method. So whatever we are incurring for the purpose of getting those borrowings or granting those loans, all those is we used to recognize to P&L upfrontly, but now it will be in a phased manner through effective interest rate, which to P&L phased manner. Now, the major amendment is the as per the guidance note issued by RBI, NBFC shall not recognize the interest income on non-performing assets. But as under Ind AS 109, it requires recognition of interest even on NPA loans. But for that purpose, you have to consider not the gross outstanding amount. You have to take the net outstanding amount. Net outstanding amount is the gross outstanding amount minus whatever provision you have made for those loans. On the net balance, you have to recognize interest income. Under IGAAP, we generally do not used to recognize this kind of income as once the account falls into the NPA. But under Ind AS, they are saying that even if the account is NPA, you have to recognize interest income, but that will be on the net balance and not the gross balance. So now I'm taking the example of effective interest rate. So my loan amount is 10 crores and processing charge is 1% of the loan that I have sanctioned. So that is 10 lakhs. Tenure of the loan is 5 years and I have to pay the full amount of the loan at the end of 5 years only. Rate of the interest is 10%. Repayment will be done, as I said, at the end of 5th year as a bullet payment. So under this case, every year I have to pay interest of 10% as per the agreement which I entered with the company. But if I incorporate the 10 lakh of processing fees into this rate of interest, my revised EIR will come to 10.27. So that 0.27 represents the amortization of 10 lakh of processing fees, which under IGAAP I used to charge to PNL upfrontly in the first year only. But under Ind AS, I will charge it to PNL as a part of my finance cost over a period of 5 years. So the effective interest rate of the borrowing is computed as 10.27. So under IGAP, what used to be my P&L charge was 1,10,000 for the first year. So 1 lakh of interest and 10 lakh of 1 crore of interest and 10 lakh of processing fees. And 2, 3, 4, 5, all those year I am going to incur interest expense of 1 crore. But under Ind AS, I will charge interest as per 10.27% instead of 10%. So over a period of time, so for example, first year, I have to hit my PNL by 1 crore 1 lakh 62,934 rupees, so and so forth. Over a period of fifth year, in both the cases, I am going to charge my PNL by 5 crore 10 lakhs only, but the cash flows will be, or the accounting adjustments will be in this fashion. So the difference, if you see at the end of fifth year, the difference will become a zero. So initially there will be higher charge of PNL under IGAP, but under Ind AS it will be amortized over a period of time on a very systematic basis. So we can see that initial year may difference is higher, and subsequently it gets reduced, and ultimately it will come to the zero. Now if we talk about the classification of financial instrument, so this is the another set of adjustment which we are going to consider, which we have to consider while transforming our accounts from IGAP to Ind AS. Under IGAP there is no such concept of financial instrument. Ind AS 109 and 107 introduce this concept. So Ind AS 32 defines that financial instruments as any contract that gives rise to a financial asset of an entity and financial liability or equity instrument of another entity. So this is the definition of financial asset. And now we're talking of the how these financial assets or liabilities are going to affect my financial statement. So how they are going to get recognized. So first of all, for the purpose of defining how they are going to get recognized, we have to identify that what are the classification or what are the classes under which these financial assets or liabilities are classified. So first one is the amortized cost, second one is fair value through profit and loss, and the third one is fair value through other comprehensive income. So these are the three categories under which one financial asset or liabilities can be classified. Liabilities के लिए we do not have the third one classification, that fair value through OCI. For liabilities we just have two classifications, amortized cost and FVTPL. What this classification talks about, I will cover it later. Such classification is based on what? So this amortized cost or FVTPL or FVTOCI, how can I understand that what kind of classification is applicable to my asset or a liability? So for that we have to consider two things, that business model of the entity I have to consider, and the contractual cash flow characteristic. These two factors will determine whether my instrument or financial asset or liability I need to value at amortized cost, FVTPL or FVTOCI. So what business model test says, that business model assessment based on the contractual cash flow characteristic refers to the way entity manages its financial asset in order to generate cash flows. For example, whether an entity holds that asset for the sole purpose of payment or payment of principal and interest, or to earn profits by selling or trading in financial assets or not. So I have to consider why management is holding this particular asset. So management's intention is to earn interest and principal out of it, or management wants to take a gain from the market fluctuation of the prices or all. So based on that I have to consider whether this investment is amortized, whether that particular financial asset I have to consider or record at amortized cost, FVTPL or FVTOCI. So as I said that for the purpose of financial liability हमारे पास सिर्फ दो classification है, amortized cost and FVTPL. FVTOCI is not applicable for the financial liabilities. Such classification under Ind AS will affect the valuation of respective financial instrument based upon the category under which they are classified. So this classification will at the end going to affect the financial or evaluation of the financial instrument. So this is the first step for the purpose of valuation of this financial statement, that under which category you are going to classify this financial instrument, sorry. So these are the examples. For example, I have my loan portfolio, that is the loan granted to my customers. For that, business model is to retain it till maturity. I'm not going to sell it and gain profit out of it. So SPPI test is complied that I have that I am holding this loan portfolio just for the purpose of getting principal and interest payment only. Income from trading, no, and that is why we are valuing it at a amortized cost. So where just as SPPI criteria is complied, we are going to value that particular financial asset or liability as an amortized cost. Investment in mutual fund, so I am holding those investment just for the purpose of parking my short-term excess fund. So in that case, I do not have any objective to hold it till maturity and earn interest and principal out of it. So in that case, my motto is to earn profit out of trading of that particular financial instrument. So in that case, the classification will be FVTPL. Now talking about the investment in redeemable debentures. So here the investment, I have done investment in some redeemable debentures which I am going to hold till the time of its maturity. I may sell it if I see that markets are going good and I get the higher price as compared to the price I get at the time of while handing it. So if I hold it, I will get X amount, and if I sell it, I'll get Y amount, and Y is higher than X. So in that case, I have both the choices available, that I am holding that particular financial asset for the purpose of getting principal and interest payment. But if I see that markets are in a market rates are going up and I can get more money by selling it, then in that case income from trading is also my objective. So in that case, both the conditions are satisfied and I will classify that particular financial instrument as an FVT OCI. So where just financial, so to summarize this, if I'm holding particular financial asset just for the purpose of getting interest and principal, then it will go to amortized cost. If I am holding that particular financial asset just for the purpose of getting gain or earning gain out of the trading of that particular financial instrument, then in that case FVTPL will be the classification. But my objective is both. Based on the condition in future, I will decide whether I want to hold it till it maturity or I want to sell it off and earn gain. Then in that case, the classification will be FVT OCI. Derivative asset, for example, currency forward I have and my purpose is just for the purpose of hedging, then the classification will be FVTPL or FVTOCI. Fixed deposit with bank, fixed deposit I am going to hold till the time of its maturity, then in that case amortized cost will be the valuation because I am not going to sell it. And security deposit, for example, I have given security deposit for the purpose of rent, then till the time that rent agreements is getting over, I'm going to hold that particular security deposit. So in that case also my valuation will be based on the amortized cost. Now talking of investment in subsidiaries and associate, so I have a separate section for it which we will cover in the later part. Okay, so अभी हम लोग देख रहे हैं concept of equity instrument and compound financial instrument. So this is something new which in the age has been introduced, that compound financial instruments were not there under earlier accounting standards that IGAAP. So Ind AS 32 defines equity instruments as any contract that evidences a residual interest in the asset or liability of the company. So any contract, any instrument which gives me the residual right money after paying everything, every my creditors, my lenders, I'll get the whatever residual there, whatever net assets will be available for the purpose of after disposing of all the liabilities. Then in that case, that particular financial instrument is classified as an equity instrument. So if I want to test that whether this financial instrument is an equity instrument, I have to first check whether it gives you a residual right or not. If it gives you a right over some other financial instruments, so for example preference share, they are getting rights over a equity share capital. So in that case we have to evaluate whether this is equity instrument or not. So there are the criteria or methods which have been given, which we are going to discuss also, that whether this instrument is a completely financial liability or a compound financial liability or an equity instrument. So the compound financial liabilities refers to what? That instrument which satisfies the both criteria. It has a component which is financial liability, and it also has a component which is equity instrument. So there are certain fixed outflows and there are certain residual interest also. So in that case, that financial instrument will be my compound financial instrument. An entity recognizes separately the components of a financial instrument that creates a financial liability of the entity and grants an option to the holder of the instrument to convert it into an equity instrument. For example, a bond or similar instrument which are convertible by the holder into a fixed number of ordinary shares of the company. So this is the example that you are holding some bond of the certain companies. That bond gives you a right whether you want to get a redemption in cash or you want to get it converted into your equity or into the equity of your company. Then in that case, that particular instrument will be classified as a financial compound financial instrument because it has the both content, financial liabilities as well equity instrument. The issuer of a non-derivative financial instrument shall evaluate the terms of the financial instrument to determine whether it contains both a liability or an equity component. So first of all, we have to determine whether it contains the liability component or not, whether it contains the equity component or not, or whether it contains both the components. Such components shall be classified separately as a financial liability and equity instrument based upon the mechanism devised under the Ind AS 109, which we are going to discuss now. So this is first example that ABC Limited has issued 1 lakh cumulative compulsory convertible preference share. These preference shares are of 10 rupees each face value. The preference shares will be converted into equity shares in the ratio of 1:1 at the end of 3 years from its issuance. Dividend, if declared, then it will get a privilege over other equity shares and it will be paid at a 12%. Now, what will be the classification of this financial instrument? Because why this classification issue is there till now, first of all, I say that this preference shares under IGAAP we generally use to classify under share capital. So under share capital we have two category: equity share capital and preference share capital. Under IGAAP we are following this kind of mechanism, but now I have to consider whether this instrument has a financial liability component inside it, equity in a component inside it, or both components are there. Instrument. This is an equity instrument. Why this is an equity instrument? That 1:1 ratio has been defined. Further, table is also my discretion. That is, there are no liabilities which are fixed that I am going to incur over a period of time. Dividend I may pay, I may not pay. This is my discretion. And at the time of redemption, I am not going to incur any cash outflow. I have to convert those instrument into my equity shares. So in that case, this will be my equity instrument because it contains the residual right. Once it will get converted into equity instrument, it will be my it will fall part of under my share capital. So now the second example is ABC Limited has issued 1 lakh redeemable cumulative preference shares of rupees 10 each. The preference shares will be redeemed at the end of 3 years from its issuance at a premium of 2 per share. Rate of dividend is 8%. So what they are saying that these preference shares will be redeemed after 3 years and with 2 rupee premium, and rate of dividend is 8%. So this kind of preference shares also under IGAAP we are showing as an share capital. But now under Ind AS, what will be the treatment for this? So let's discuss that. This will be classified as a financial liability and not the equity instrument. Under IGAAP, we used to classify this kind of instrument as an equity instrument, but under Ind AS, this will be my financial liability, since there is no conversion option available, so it is not a residual interest evidence. There are no any residual interest evidence. Further, this instrument will be recorded at a amortized cost. So the way we recognize borrowing in my books, same way I will recognize these preference shares as a financial liability in my book with the use of effective interest rate method, the example which we just saw. And the dividend which I pay, this will form part of my finance cost. Till now, this dividend we are using to deduct from the retained earnings under IGAAP, but now this dividend will form part of my finance cost and it will be charged to statement of P&L before profit, computing profit before tax. Till now, it formed part of, it will be deducted from profit after tax, but now it will fall, it will be part of my finance cost and it will be disclosed before profit before tax. So now the third one, ABC Limited has issued 1 lakh cumulative optionally convertible preference share. So the words are important: optionally convertible preference shares of rupees 10 each. The preference shares will be either converted into equity shares in the ratio of 1:1 or redeemed in full. So the holder has a choice whether they want to get it redeemed or they want to get it converted into equity. So, and as usual, the dividend, if declared, gets the privilege over other shares and it will be paid at 6%. So in this case, how I am going to classify this financial instrument, because it has the conversion option, so we can say that equity instrument characteristics are there, plus it has the option of getting redeemed also. So there are symptoms of or evidences of financial liabilities also, factors of. So this instrument will be classified as a compound financial instrument, since it is at the discretion of the holder whether to convert it into shares or to get it redeemed on maturity. So I have also considered the example how the accounting will be done in case of compounding financial instrument, because this is something new under Ind AS normal equity accounting which we used to do under IGAAP. But now I have to split this particular financial instrument into two legs. One is the equity instrument which will be part of my equity, and another one is the financial liability which will be part of my debt and borrowing. So now this is the example that what will be the accounting treatment of the earlier example that we have considered. The data which I have available from the market, that preference fair value of like preference shares without the conversion option is the 8 rupee per share. Why this is required? That for the purpose of the here the rule is that if you want to value or recognize compound financial instrument in your financial statement, you have to first find out the fair value of financial liability. And the total after if you have a total financial statement, financial instrument having value of 100 rupees, out of that the value attributable to finance liability is 80, then remaining 20 will be your equity. So for the purpose of computing the value of both the components, the guidance is given that you have to first compute the fair value of financial liability. The residual portion will be allotted to equity. So for that we need the fair value of financial liability. So we have a like instrument available in the market which are getting issued at the at 8 rupees per share. So here we have issued preference shares at 10 rupees but with conversion option. But if I eliminate the conversion option, this kind instruments are uh, you know available in the market at 8 rupees per share. Initial recognition, what will be my accounting entries got from the investor, that is 10 lakh rupees I have to debit. Financial liability will be 8 rupees because 8 is attributed the financial my financial liability component and residual component have on the financial liability. Okay. Third year, my interest expense will be 928,312 into 7.72 percentage. So 71 at the end of third year, 71,000 I have added as a part of interest cost. So at the end of third year, if that particular financial instrument is redeemed in full, then financial liability to bank, that will be my entry, that 10 lakh rupees I have to pay in cash. But if it is converted to equity shares, then financial liability will be debited by 10 lakhs to equity share capital of 1 rupees, because 1 rupee is the face value and 9 rupee of the securities premium, which will be parked under securities premium account. So this is how we are going to deal with this kind of financial instrument or financial compound financial instrument. So now this is something new concept under IGAP. For this, we do not have any specific guidance, but we have the RBI guidance available for the purpose of derecognition of financial assets. That RBI says that if true sale criteria has been met, or true sale criteria whatever prescribed by the IBI are getting fulfilled, then in that case you can de-recognize your financial asset. This guidance has been given just for the purpose of securitization and direct assignment transactions. So I here assume that we are aware of what kind of securitization and direct assignment transactions are taking place in the market. Just to give a brief, that for example, I have a loan portfolio, say for example of 10,000 rupees, and I want the immediate cash flows. So what banks and NBFCs are doing, that they sell that particular asset to other lenders, and they are not selling it off in 100% way. So 90% of the asset or 90% of cash flow they assign to other parties. So under the 100 rupee loan, 90% of the interest has been transferred to another party, and 10% of the interest has been retained by that particular issuer or bank or NBFC. So this is how this kind of derecognition, the direct assignment and securitization transactions are getting placed for the purpose of immediate realization of cash. So under Ind AS, asset will be so yeah. So what I was saying, that under IGAP there was a criteria of true sell as prescribed by RBI, but under Ind AS they have a separate guidance under 109, that the contractual rights to the cash flow, if that is going to expire, and entity transfers the financial asset by way of transferring contractual rights to receive cash flow, and substantial all the risks reward has been transferred. This particular sentence we know that revenue will be recognized when substantial all risk and rewards have been transferred. So what for the purpose of derecognition, 109 says that you can derecognize any asset if these two criteria is getting met, that contractual right to the cash flows are expired, evaluated at said that under Ind AS, first of all, we are required to prepare consolidated financial statement, and under 110, under Ind AS 110. So what this particular Ind AS says that this criteria of derecognition we have to consider over a group level and not at the individual level. So this is the flow chart to understand that we first of all have to for the purpose of evaluating derecognition criteria, we first of all have to evaluate that we have to consolidate all the subsidiaries and determine whether derecognition principle is applied to part of the asset or similar group, whether the whole financial instrument has been sold or the part of financial instrument has been sold, that we have to consider. Have the has been expired or not is the asset. If no, then for cash flows from the asset. If no, has the entity assumed an obligation to pay the cash flows from the asset, for example, like a trust, then we continue have to recognize the asset. But if yes, then we further have to evaluate that has the entity transferred substantially all the risk and reward. If yes, we recognize the asset. So for, here the second condition is coming that the first one was the right, all the right to receive cash flow has been expired or not, that we are checking. And the second condition is the has entity transferred substantially all risk and reward. If yes, then also you have to recognize the asset. If not, then you have to evaluate whether we have retained all the substantial rights, risk and reward. Yes, then we have to continue recognizing that particular asset, because if we are retaining all the all the rights and rewards, then we cannot de-recognize that particular asset. But if no, we further have to evaluate whether we are retaining the control of that asset or not. तो मेरे पास control भी नहीं है, then also I have to de-recognize that particular asset. And yes, I have a control, but I have transferred all the risk and reward substantially, then in that case I have to continually recognize asset to the extent of my involvement only. So for example, out of 100 rupee instrument, 90 percentage I have transferred substantially all the risk and reward, but the control is there with me for the purpose of remaining 10 percentage. In that case I have to continue recognizing the portion that represents my continuing involvement. This diagram we need to refer for the purpose of evaluating the criteria whether we can re-recognize asset or not. But for the purpose of its actual application, we have to evaluate whether entity has transferred risk and rewards. One need to compute and compare entity's exposure or variability of the present value of future cash flows before and after. So how can I understand that whether I have transferred all the risk and rewards? So for that I have to consider this. There I have to take one test that after after transferring risk and reward, what are my cash flows, and before transferring risk and reward, what were my cash flows. If these two cash flows are varying, then in that case we can say that risk and rewards have been transferred. So for example, before transfer I am going to receive 100 rupee over a period of time, but after transfer I am going to receive just 5 rupee over a period of time. Then in that case I can say that I have substantially transferred my all risk and reward, because as compared to 100, now I am going to recover only 5 rupees. Yes. Second is the control, whether entity has retained control or not. This is also there in the diagram. So for that we have another condition that we have to consider, that whether entity has retained the control of the transferred asset or not, that depends upon the transferee's ability to sell the asset. Whether transferee to whom I am transferring my risk and reward, whether they have the ability to sell the entire asset further. If yes, then my control is gone. If no, then my control is still there. I cannot de-recognize that asset in full. On de-recognition of a financial asset, the difference between carrying amount and the consideration received shall be recognized in profit and loss upfront. under IGAP, what they were saying that over a period of time we have to recognize this profit or loss, but under Ind AS they are saying that the gain or loss whatever we are getting or earning at the time of derecognition, this will be simply added to my or deducted from my profit and loss. So I think now this example will give you a more clarity. This was the theoretical explanation. This diagram was altogether a theoretical explanation that consolidated all the entities and uh, evaluate the criteria, whether we have retained control, whether we right to receive cash flows has been expired, and whether the risk and rewards have been substantially transformed. Even after that, we are evaluating whether we have retained the control of the asset or not. But now, considering this illustration, it will give you a better clarity, I think. Okay, so the assumptions are outstanding amount of portfolio loan is 1 lakh. So I have granted one loan that amounting to 1 lakh of rupees to my customer. The coupon and EIR, considering that no transaction costs are involved, my coupon and EIR both sets to 10%. Direct assignment of cash flow. What I do that 90% of my principal amount, I'm assigning it to someone else. So I'm disposing of 90% of the instrument to someone else and 9.5% interest rate. So out of 10%, 9.5% I have to pay off to someone else, and 90%, that is out of 1 lakh 90,000 principal payment I have to assign someone else. Someone else will collect it. So I have disposed of that particular assignment, financial asset, but to the extent of 90% only, not the entire financial instrument that I have sold. The consideration for this transaction I have received is 91,000. Fair value of interest paid is 500 rupees. Trade is that 10% I am going to take from my customer and 9.5% I am going to pay someone. So that 0.5% is my interest spread which I am going to earn, and the fair value of that interest spread is 500 rupees at the time of recognition. The pending loan tenure is 2 years. तो विद इन नेक्स्ट 2 years ये लोन मेरी खत्म होने वाली है. So what kind of accounting adjustment I am going to do over here, that entity retains the right to 10,000 of collection of principal. So as I said 1 lakh में से 90% हम लोगों ने सेल कर दिया है, तो 10,000 still we are going to get. 90,000 जिसको हमने सेल किया है वो लोग कलेक्ट करने वाले हैं, प्लस आउट ऑफ 10% ऑफ इंटरेस्ट 0.5 मैं मेरा इनकम है और 9.5 इज गोइंग टू गेट और इज 9.5 आई हैव ऑलरेडी सोल्ड, तो वो किसी और को मिलने वाला है, मुझे नहीं मिलने वाला है. So collection and prepayments are allocated between the party into 1:9 because 90% मैंने सेल कर दिया है, तो मुझे एक 1 portion मेरा होगा, 9 portion होगा the party to whom I have sold this asset. Now entity determines that it has transferred all the risk and rewards and regarding this portfolio. So in that case, how the accounting will be done, that profit on the derecognition will be the difference between total consideration, that is 91,000, less the carrying value of portfolio assigned. So my consideration is 91,000 which I have already received, but 500 I am going to receive over a period of time, which represents that 0.5% of interest which I am retaining for me. So the fair value of that spread is 500 rupees. So 91,500 is my consideration received plus receivable, less carrying value of the portfolio which we show that 90,000, because the total loan is 1 lakh, out of which I am going to sell 90%. So 90,000 is the carrying value that I have disposed of. So consideration received includes upfront payment of 91,000 plus present value of spread, that is 500. Okay. Now what will be the accounting entry? That 91,000 I am getting to the original loan portfolio 90,000 and deferred profit derecognition 1,000. This is the accounting entry which we used to follow under IGAP. जो 1,000 रुपए का प्रॉफिट मुझे दिख रहा है यहाँ पे, ये 1,000 रुपए का प्रॉफिट आई एम गोइंग टू recognize over a period of time. I do not recognize it upfront in the statement of P&L, but now under Ind AS, what it says that this profit is going to be recognized in the P&L upfront basis. So the consideration received by bank is 91,000. The asset, which is consideration, which is receivable, that I also have to create of 500 rupees. The original value of the portfolio asset was 90,000, which I am re-recognizing, and the gain of 1,500 I am recognizing upfront. So profit on de-recognition will be my 1,500 rupees. Immediately following the transaction, the carrying amount of the asset is now 10,500, because 10,000 is the original loan and 500 is the spread which I have created through this entry. And in subsequent periods, entity recognizes the consideration received and using effective interest method. So over a period of time मुझे 10,000 और 500 रुपए मिलने वाला है. जैसे जैसे ये मिलता रहेगा मैं इसकी asset की amount कम करता जाऊंगा. Now the another adjustment is employee benefit plans. This is the regular adjustment which all the entities, I think, who have transited from IGAP to Ind AS, they are going to face this. So till now, whatever actual gain or loss were there on defined benefit plans. Defined benefit plans are the gratuity and other post employment benefit plan. We can say that the actual gain or loss on that, till now we used to charge it to P&L, but now it will be classified to other comprehensive income, and it will not be reclassified to P&L, but it will be directly then from there it will go to the my other equity, statement of changes in other equity. So directly it will be added to my retained earnings. So this is the major change, that till now whatever actual gain loss we used to get it from the actuary reports, we charge it to P&L, but now onwards we will park it under other comprehensive income. The fair value of investment, which we in earlier sections saw that under Ind AS or under AS 13 we have a criteria that for current investments the valuation will be lower of the cost or market value, that is fair value, and for long term investment it will be at a cost less provision in diminution. So the diminution provision, which will be the permanent in nature, temporary natures we are going to ignore. Under Ind AS 109, it says that all the investments are required to be fair valued, whether it upward valuation or downward. So cost of lower of the cost of NRV is not the case over here. Whether irrespective of the fact that my NRV or fair value is higher than the cost, I have to recognize gain. If it is lower, then I have to recognize loss. However, for investment in subsidiary, associate, and joint venture, there is option given under Ind AS 27 that we can value it at a cost. So under Ind AS 7, they have given a two option, whether you want to recognize this investment in subsidiary, associate, and joint venture as at a cost or through fair valuation. If entity adopts to value it at fair value, then again they have to consider they have to revalue those subsidiaries and associates and joint venture investment at regular interval, and the fair valuation is required for them also, as compared to IGAP जहाँ पे हम लोग सिर्फ कॉस्ट पे दिखाते थे और परमानेंट डिमिन्यूशन जो होता था वो ही रिकॉर्ड करते थे. बट नाउ इफ वी चूज फॉर द fair valuation at regular interval, we have to do fair valuation of all the investment, whether it is upward valuation or downward valuation. Under the current regime, so this is the one another change, that expected credit loss. Under the current regime, loan loss provisions are created based on the guidelines provided by RBI. So till now, what are the provisions are based on the RBI incurred loss method. So the RBI has prescribed that if you are NBFC, you NBFC, this class of NBFC, you have to follow this particular model. This class of NBFC, then you have to follow this kind of model. For the purpose of provision, they have already bifurcated assets into standard assets, doubtful, and bad assets, and based on that we are going to do the provision. But now what Ind AS says that the current provision model devised by RBI was based on the incurred loss model. So RBI have done the research, and based on that they have devised a model So this was based on the historical loss data, but as compared to that, Ind AS says that you are required to follow the expected credit loss model, wherein the loan loss provision is calculated on the basis of entity's historical loan loss experience and future expected credit loss depending on credit quality assessment. So till now the assessment or the provision was based on the incurred loss model, but now we have to be the futuristic. We also have to predict the future, and based on that we have to do the provision. So the not only based on the historical data, as I said, we also have to adopt forward looking information such as loan recovery patterns, time of recovery, profitability of default, and recovery expected from collaterals. So these forward informations also we have to consider, which as of now under RBI model, which we are not considering. Okay, so expected credit loss model establishes three-stage impairment model. So till now we have a stages like standard assets, substandard may be doubtful, और वो एक साल तक एनपीए, एक से 2 साल तक एनपीए, वैसे वैसे सारे क्राइटेरिया थे. But now these there are only 3 stages: stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Based on that we have to do the provision. So if at a reporting date credit risk on the financial instrument has not increased significantly, then the asset will be under stage 1. If it has been increased significantly, it will go to stage 2, and stage 3 are the assets which are totally credit impaired. So for the purpose of provisioning also, we have a two provisioning model, that 12-month expected credit loss and the lifetime expected credit loss. So what standard says that for the purpose of for the purpose of stage 1 assets, we have to follow 12-month expected credit loss model, because there are less chances of default are there under stage 1, because they are as good as these standard assets. But stage 2 and stage 3 we have to follow the lifetime expected credit loss model by deriving the probability of default and loss given default or other terms, which we see under illustration. Ind AS 109 talks about the two types of model, as I said, that 12-month and lifetime ECL. Lifetime expected credit losses estimates the risk of default occurring on the financial instrument during its entire expected life. Against that 12 मंथ वाला जो मॉडल है वो नेक्स्ट 12 मंथ में मेरी प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ डिफॉल्ट क्या है उसके बेसिस पे मेरा प्रोविजन वैल्यू मुझे लाके देगा. बट लाइफ टाइम ईसीएल में आई हैव टू फोरकास्ट माय टोटल लॉस ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ remaining period of that particular asset. Ind AS allows to assess the credit. Yeah, this is also a new concept that you can assess the customers individually and the collectively. So how collectively assessment can be done, that is also have been covered under later part of slides. First of all, we talk about the individual assessment. So by taking one example, that on 1st April 2016, company X has provided a loan of 1 lakh rupee to company Y for 5 years, and the rate of interest is 10%. On 31st March 2018, after 2 years, company Y expected to have some cash problem with the industry recession. That risk has been significantly increased. So till now there was no risk, but now the risk has been significantly increased because the market which company has forecasted or seen that there are some recession is going on, and because of that the collectability will be under a issue. And on 31st March 2019, this particular loan is restructured and extended for another 5 years because company Y does not have enough liquidity to repay that. So now that particular loan is credit impaired, company do not have any option but to restructure it, because if company is not going to restructure this loan, will not that particular borrower will not be in the position to repay that loan. So for the purpose of individual assessment, first of all, as on 31st March 2017, there were no indicators of default. The loan was lying under stage 1. And for stage 1, company expects that there are 2% of the probability that the borrower will default. So in that case, only 2000 will be my provision value. Interest income I will recognize on 1 lakh. So interest, for the purpose of recognition of income, I will take the gross carrying value, but I will also make a 2000 provision. So in financial statement, the loan will come at 98,000. As on 31st March 2018, I evidence that significant risk has been increased. So now that loan will be reclassified under stage 1 to stage 2. And for the purpose of stage 2, company is expecting that chances are there of default is 40%. So the star marks is the probability of loan getting default in next 12 months, and company will not get any amount. So if there are, for the purpose of stage 1, there are chances that 2% is the probability that that particular borrower is not going to pay any money to company. But for stage 2 loans, company has based on its past experience or the factors which we discussed, that recoverability and all, company is expecting that 40% are the chances that this particular borrower is not going to repay me. Then in that case, 40,000 will be my provision. But here under stage 2 also, for the purpose of recognition of interest income, I will consider 1 lakh gross carrying value only. But now the twist is, on 31st March 2019, that particular loan is credit impaired. So here I'm classifying that loan as a stage 3 loan. And for the purpose of stage 3, company has determined that lifetime loss percentage are 65%. So the company will make a provision of 65,000. But as we discussed earlier, that in case of credit impaired assets, Ind AS says that you have to recognize interest not on the gross carrying value but on the net carrying value. And here the net carrying value is 1 lakh minus 65,000 is 35,000. Under IGAAP, what we used to do, that we do not, or we stop recognizing income for NPA assets. Under Ind AS, we have to recognize that interest on NPA asset, but not on 1 lakh, on 35,000 only. So now the example of collective assessment. For the purpose of collective assessment, a company can group its loan portfolio in various ways, such as based on the nature of loans granted or based on the customer group, by bifurcating the outstanding portfolio into various age buckets, geographical location of customer, etc. For example, if I say that company has granted various loans to various kind of customers, for example, the company can bifurcate a portfolio of loan into geographical segments also. So वेस्टर्न रीजन में कितनी लोन गई है, सेंट्रल रीजन में कितनी गई है. सो बेस्ड ऑन द जियोग्राफी, और कंपनी ऑल्सो डू दैट डोमेस्टिक लोन्स कितनी है मेरी, इंटरनेशनल लोन्स कितनी है, काइंड ऑफ दैट. एज बकेट्स के हिसाब से भी कंपनी डाल सकती है. फॉर एग्जांपल कि यंगस्टर्स को मैंने कितनी होम लोन्स दी है, या फिर सीनियर सिटीजन्स को मैंने कितनी पर्सनल लोन्स दी है, और दैट काइंड ऑफ assessment can also be done. Based on the customer group also, company can do this kind of analysis. For example, customer group कौन सा है मेरा, कि एग्रीकल्चर में इन्वॉल्व है मेरे सारे कस्टमर्स, या फिर वो इंडस्ट्री के कस्टमर्स है. Based on that also I can segregate my portfolio. Company shall determine the probability of default for each of the individual groups based on the past history, future payments, and forecasted relevant factors. So now is, instead of individual assessment, what I will do, that for the bunch of customers I will do a collective assessment, and the provision also will be on a group basis. So we have seen that kind of provision under the trade receivable, that certain companies are following, that if my outstanding are from 0 to 30 days, this will be my percentage of provision. From 30 to 60 days, XYZ so and so a percentage I am going to provide as in loss provision. So this kind of collective assessment is also possible under Ind AS, but for the purpose of that, first of all you have to classify your outstanding portfolio into perfect groups, and based on that you can apply Ind AS. Now the another adjustment which is going to come under Ind AS is the financial guarantee contracts. Till now हमें जो भी financial guarantees हम लोगों ने दी थी, वो हम लोग कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी में दिखा के छोड़ देते थे, उसके ऊपर फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट में कोई अकाउंटिंग एंट्रीज नहीं आती थी। बट नाउ अंडर इंड एज दे आर ऑल्सो सेइंग दैट कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी नहीं दिखानी है, यू हैव टू पास एक्चुअल एंट्रीज फॉर दिस फाइनेंशियल गारंटी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट। वो कैसे होगी वो हम इलस्ट्रेशन के थ्रू देखेंगे। अंडर आई गैप, issuer of financial guarantee is required to disclose the same as contingent liability. But under Ind AS 109 requires issuer of financial guarantee to recognize associated liability in books of account. Ind AS 109 defines so this is the definition that what is the financial guarantee contract is. So a contract that requires the issuer to make specified payments to reimburse the holder for a loss it incurs because a specified debtor fails to make a payment. So for example, there are three companies A, B, and C. C is the bank, and the A is the person who have taken the loan from the bank, and B, which is me, I have provided a guarantee to bank that if A fails to pay money to you, I will pay on his behalf. So this is a financial guarantee contract where B is the guarantor, A is the borrower or the first party we can say, and bank is the lender. So now we are taking one illustration that the one loan that financial bank or NBFC has been granted to its customer, that a 10-year tenured loan has been sanctioned. Loan amount is 1 crore. Guarantee fees कुछ चार्ज नहीं किया है। फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ द गारंटी फीस 2 लाख रुपए है। जो फॉर एग्जांपल मार्केट में अगर ये पर्टिकुलर टाइप ऑफ गारंटी हम लोग किसी और थर्ड पार्टी से दिलवाते तो वो 2 लाख रुपीज इट्स गारंटी फीस चार्ज करती। तो ये गारंटी फीस हम लोगों ने डिफाइन किए फ्रॉम द अनरिलेटेड एंटिटी इन केस ऑफ गारंटी इशूड बाय देम। So here the example is that my parent company is giving financial guarantee on behalf of subsidiary company to the bank who has sanctioned the loan to subsidiary company. So bank, or we can say the NBFC, because we are considering the impact on NBFC. So that financial institution has granted 1 crore rupee loan to subsidiary company. That subsidiary company is an NBFC. Me, a parent company, is also an NBFC. So in that case, I have provided guarantee to bank on behalf of B, that अगर B का कुछ failure हुआ तो as a parent I will repay. But for that I am not charging any guarantee commission. The fair value of that guarantee commission, अगर B ने मेरे से guarantee नहीं ली होती और market में किसी और से guarantee ली होती, then in that case what will be the charge of that particular person जो B से charge करता है, वो 2 लाख रुपये हम लोगों ने डिटरमाइन किया है। नाउ अकाउंटिंग इन दी बुक्स ऑफ पेरेंट, जिन्होंने गारंटी दी है तो गारंटर की बुक में क्या अकाउंटिंग होगी। सो पेरेंट शेल रिकॉग्नाइज लायबिलिटी ऑफ 2 लाख by adding corresponding amount to investment in subsidiaries, because this is indirect investment in the subsidiaries. You have to add 2 lakhs in the investment value, and you have to show that you have a liability to pay if the B is failing, if the B is not going to pay to bank. In that case you have to incur a liability, so you have to show the liability at 2 lakh and the corresponding adjustment will be under investment value. Accounting under books of parent, which is continued. Subsequently, guarantee fees are recognized as an income over a period of tenure by reducing the liability to that extent. So for example, 5 हमारे केस में the loan tenure is 10 year, so over a period of 10 year 20,000 is the income which I am going to recognize. However, in consolidated financial statement of the group, the parent shall reverse the aforesaid accounting and whatever is the given under standalone financial statement, because under consolidated financial statement my subsidiary and parent both are going to get merged. So under consolidated financial statement I am going to reverse this impact, but under my standalone financial statement I have to initially recognize 2 lakhs of liability and asset, and that liability will be amortized over a period of 10 years by by crediting it to P&L 20,000 rupees per year. So now accounting in the books of subsidiary. So Ind AS 109 specifies that accounting treatment is the only for the parenting, matlab the one who issues the guarantee, the one who is the guarantor, but it doesn't specify or it doesn't apply to the beneficiary of the guarantee contract. Okay, so now we are talking of the other adjustments which are going to adjust, or which are the account balance which will be affected due to introduction of this Ind AS. So first of all, my financial statement presentation format will get changed. That financial statement under IGAAP, we used to follow the part 1 of the schedule 3 financial statement, which is for IGAAP. Part 2 is the Ind AS financial statement format, but that is for other than NBFCs. And now the another part 3 has been introduced by MCA, that part 3 of schedule 3, that particular format have to be followed by in NBFCs, which are going to follow Ind AS. So under IGAAP, the financial statement contains balance sheet, profit loss, cash flow statement, and notes. But now under Ind AS, the balance sheet plus statement of P&L plus the one which will be included is the other comprehensive income. New one is the statement of changes in equity will also come. Cash flow statement and notes are the common under both the formats. But now I to add on that part 1 and part 3 का जो format है, जो पूरा part 3 का format है, that has been designed on the basis of liquidity concept. So if you see the part 3 of schedule 3, instead of starting with property plant equipment, it has been kept at last. They have started with the financial instrument, then non-financial instrument, and then after a certain equity portions are there. So based on the liquidity approach, they have designed this part 3 financial statements. Now talking about the other change, that under IGAAP, we have a line item says extraordinary items, but that particular line item has been now removed under Ind AS. So items of income or expense to be disclosed separately as extraordinary item if it's distinct from the ordinary activities of an entity and are determined by considering the nature of that event or transaction. So this we used to do under IGAAP, but under Ind AS that particular line has been abolished. So Ind AS में हमारे पास extraordinary item जैसी कोई line नहीं है. But yes, we do have an exceptional item. So if we have certain kind of transactions which are not regular in nature, we can show it under there. Another change is there in under deferred tax, that till now deferred tax are computed based on the timing differences. So what we till now used to do, that we take statement of tax computation, whatever adjustments are there, whether they are timing differences or permanent in nature, we segregate those differences, and all those timing differences we are recognizing asset on the same. So now under Ind AS, instead of timing differences, we have a concept of balance sheet approach. So under balance sheet approach, we have to check each and every line item of the balance sheet and what are the tax bases of that particular asset and what are the bases under our financial statement that we have to consider. So deferred is, so under deferred account on temporary basis, we have to consider the difference between carrying amount of an asset and the liability as per financial book and corresponding tax. So we have to consider what will be the amount under balance sheet and will be the amount net financial statement. Based we have to defer tax. Now the another change is segment identification. So till now we have a separate guidance given under the AS7 that how the segmentation will be done, the 10% criteria, business segment, all this guidance have been given under AS7. But now under Ind AS, what they said, the operating segment identifies on the financial instrument, that is regularly reviewed by chief the operating decision maker. A CODM concept has been introduced that hello Ind AS 108 says that operating segments are identified based on financial instrument that is regularly reviewed by CODM in decision making for the purpose of asset allocation and the assessing performance. So the concept of CODM has been introduced. तो हमें यहाँ पे ये देखना है कि instead of the 10% criteria and the business and geographical segment, now how management looks at its financial statement under MIS report, or somewhere we can see that management is considering this three or five or particular streams for the purpose of evaluating their performance. Then those particular streams will be my another adjustment is the consolidation under joint venture. So till now the joint ventures have been consolidated based on the proportionate consolidation method, but now the joint ventures will be consolidated in same line with the associate accounting equity method. So अभी तक कैसा था कि for the purpose of if I have a JV of 50-50%, I will do a proportionate consolidation instead of full consolidation. तो 50-50% एसेट और लायबिलिटी में मेरा हिस्सा रिकॉग्नाइज करता था फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट में. बट नाउ this accounting treatment which we follow for the associated entities. So associate enterprises के लिए हम लोग कहते थे सिर्फ उसका प्रॉफिट हमारी बुक में अकाउंट फॉर करते थे और corresponding adjustment we do in the investment. So that equity method is going to used for joint ventures also, the way we use for associate enterprises or associate companies. Now another one is the non-controlling interest or minority interest. So losses are attributable to the minority interest only to the extent of its outstanding balance, and losses are required to be attributable to the non-controlling interest to the extent of its share even if it results into deficit balance. So आई गेप में ऐसा गाइडेंस था कि माइनॉरिटी इंटरेस्ट का बैलेंस कभी नेगेटिव नहीं जाना चाहिए अगर मतलब इट लॉसेस विल बी एडजस्टेड only to the extent if it comes to zero से नीचे गया तो उसका एडजस्टमेंट that will be bought by the parent company. But under Ind AS they says that non-controlling interest even if it goes to debit balance it will go, but to the extent of its share, जहां तक उनका शेयर है लॉस बेयर करने का वहां तक जाना चाहिए, whether or not it is positive or negative you don't have to consider that. So now one big change is that lease accounting, which in I think 2 or 3 days we also have a session on that in days 116 that has come new in this particular financial year 2019-20. So under old scenario we have two types of accounting, that operating lease, finance lease for lessee, and for lessor also we have operating lease and finance lease. But under new regime, that one new 116 says that for lessee there will be accounting based on the right of use asset and corresponding lease liability. For lessor the same accounting is prescribed in the new standard, but for lessee the total accounting has been changed. The concept of operating lease and finance lease has been eliminated. For lessee they have to account for based on the right of use asset. So whatever right they have in that particular asset which they have taken on lease, and corresponding lease liability they have to create it, whether or not it qualifies for finance lease or not. So same kind of more or less we can say that finance lease accounting will be done even for operating leases also under Ind AS 116. I think that's it from my side. So now we can open for the question answer session if anyone is having. Hello. Hello, Virag.
Yes, Jainam bhai.
Hello. Hello. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, Virag
Virag.
bhai,
So
bolo.
now
There
we
are
can
few
start
questions in
question
the
answer.
question tab.
Sorry.
There are few questions
Hello.
in the question tab.
Okay. Acha, question tab. Okay. So the first one is, I think, why the securitization transaction is not de-recognized in the books under Ind AS, as they were shown of the books under erstwhile IGAP. So सिक्योरिटाइजेशन ट्रांजेक्शन के लिए आई कैन से दैट अर्स्टवाइल आई गैप में भी वो लोग ऑफ बुक में तो हम लोग नहीं बताते थे, अर्स्टवाइल आई गैप में हम लोग उसे डी रिकॉग्नाइज करके लोन पोर्टफोलियो से कम कर देते थे securitization transaction. But if you have observed that under securitization transaction there is a element of credit enhancement. So through credit enhancement we are not passing our substantial risk and rewards. So that particular criteria of de-recognizing any asset, that the cash flow are matlab cash flow in cash inflows are expired, and significant risk and rewards have been transferred. So in securitization transaction that particular criteria is not getting fulfilled, that we have not transferred substantial risk and reward. We are providing credit enhancement, which is not the case in direct assignment. Direct assignment में क्या होता है कि जो भी loss हुआ we will share in the ratio which has been agreed. But under securitization transaction we always have a element of credit enhancement, due to which we can say that risk and rewards have not been transferred, and in that case we cannot de-recognize asset in our book. I think there is only one question. No, there are question. Yeah, similar to NPA regime, currently it will not be great to book income and pay taxes in such loans. Yes, that is truly said that मतलब Ind AS is saying that NPA के ऊपर भी आपको net amount पे interest book करना है, but RBI is not saying that you can book interest on an NPA. So this is a gap adjustment. Recently the RBI has issued one circular that this kind of because people are facing some difficulties in ECL also. So RBI has clarified a lot of things, but this particular question has not been yet answered by RBI, and that is why we still have to follow what India says, that we have to create interest income on the net amount. Net amount by mean I say gross value of the loan minus whatever provision you have made, and net amount you have to you have to book an income. So till now RBI is silent on this, but ideally from my view this is a thing, matlab we can say that the total amount or principal amount on which we are providing we are doing provision, we should not recognize income. But as of now there is no clarity and we have to follow India's only. So we have to book income on the we can say the net carrying value. How are the stages of ECL determined? So stages of ECL के लिए पूरा एक guidance है Ind AS 109 में. Generally it says that if initially the risk is not higher on particular asset, if मतलब if we compare it to the RBI norms, the asset is standard in nature, then it will fall under stage 1. Now if we talk that risk has been increased substantially, जैसे हम लोगों ने हमारे एग्जांपल में देखा कि after 2 years we come to know that particular industry में कोई recession आया है, because of that my particular customer is not able to pay me, and because of that, as compared to earlier stage, the risk has been increased significantly. So for that I have to move from stage 1 to stage 2. But apart from that, there are guidance that whatever asset or whatever loan asset my is outstanding for more than 30 days, I have to consider it as a stage 2 asset, and whatever assets are outstanding for more than 90 days, I have to consider as a credit impaired asset or a stage 3 asset. These are the rebuttable presumptions given by Ind AS. If my entity or in my entity I have observed something else, so for example, based on the past experience, I can say that till 50 days, for me, it is a stage 1 asset only, because my past history shows that 50 days में मेरा पैसा आ ही जाता है, though it is outstanding for more than up to 50 days. I have a history that I can get full money back. So for me, stage 1 assets are 50 up to not due assets and 50 days asset, and 50 to 90 are stage 2, and 90 and above are stage 3. But we have to prove this. But the recent circular which RBI has issued, वहाँ पे उन्होंने ये रिबर्टेबल presumption भी निकाल दिया है, ये ऑप्शन भी निकाल दिया है, 30 डेज से ज्यादा है तो हमें स्टेज 2 में क्लासिफाई करना है, और मोर देन 90 स्टेज 3 में आ जाएगा. Now, can you please explain in the processing fees example how 10.27 is worked out? Okay, so for 10.27, I can say that what you have to do is you have to put your all your cash flows. That my cash flow will be 1 crore of interest expense over a period of 5 years, and initially I have a 10 lakh of outflow. So outflow will be 9 crore 90 lakhs, and 1 crore, sorry, 9 crore 90 lakhs will be my inflow of the first year, and 1 crore is the outflow over a period of 5 years, and at the end my outflow will be 10 crore more rupees. So what I have to do is I have to find EIR by computing the IRR formula in the Excel, if you can do it. So for example, we also can do that just for the purpose of getting clarity. I have that. I'll actually once that Excel is once, I will envision how 20.27. If now we are taking another question, that if something is classified as stage 2, then percentage is to be shown at ACL. Is it fixed or is it depend upon expectation? Okay, so for the purpose of deriving this percentage, we have to do a exercise that we have to consider my history, that how that particular accounts has been observed, or we can take a data of past few years, say for example 5 years or 7 years or 2-3 years, based on the loan tenure which we have. If I generally grant loan for 5 years, I can take a data of last 5 years, and based on that I can derive a model that percentage plus whatever my future expectation. Future expectation by mean that collateral, if I have that I have certain assets as a collateral available with me, so from loss I have to deduct loss percentage, I have to deduct the amount of recoverability which I am expecting. So for example, uh, for one asset, I have based on my past records, I have seen that out of 1 lakh I have 30 percentage recoverability policy based on my past experience, 10 which I can recover in future from the collateral which I have. So now that talking about that 10.27 percentage, so I particular percentage has been calculated. So if you see here, these are my actual discount factor. So 10% हमारा interest इसमें ROI है, value 10 crore आ रही है. Opening value is my 9 crore 90 lakh. So 10 minus 10 is my opening value. और 10.27 से अगर मैं इसके ऊपर interest load करूंगा, तो at the end of fifth year, my balance will come to zero. So what is internal rate of return, or EIR or IIR? So 27. We have a EIR formula also in Excel, based on which also you can do this. XIRR formulas. So you have to just find out that for IRR we find for other business calculations. The same way you have to find EIR for Ind AS application. Now the another question is whether ECL is to be made on debtors also. So ECL is the terminology used by Ind AS 109. So whatever financial assets are there falling under Ind AS 109, financial instruments which are classified as financial assets, for all those financial assets we have to follow ECL provisioning, whether it is debtor, whether it is receivable, whether it is security deposits, whether they are any other investment. But if those particular financial, no, I think how Ind AS will impact disclosure. Financial statement format part 3. So we have to go that because disclosures are immensely changed from IGAP to Ind AS. Even not only disclosures, but the line items of financial statement has also been got under change. So we have to see that the guidance note is also available for part 3. Exposure draft is there. We can refer that also for the purpose of looking at the disclosure requirement. Now I take the another question, that if corporate guarantee is to be recognized in parent book as per your example, say 2 lakh, and how to show it over a period when allocated in 5 years. Can you explain, JV? So what will be the accounting treatment? That initially that 2 lakhs will be my asset and liability. It will hit my assets in investments, and my liabilities will be the financial guarantee liabilities. So that liability will be amortized over a period of 5 years. In my example it was 10 years, and the asset, it will remain as it is, it will not get amortized. So whatever I have added to my investment side, that will not get amortized, because this is an indirect investment. This will be this will be knocked off only when at the time of I dispose of that particular investment. At that time only this particular treatment will be adjusted under financial asset, or we can say in investment. So asset side, there will not be any adjustment over a period of time, but liability will be amortized, because at the end of loan tenure there will not be any liability for me. So over a period of time liability will be amortized. Okay, the another question is corporate guarantee provided in direct assignment to be recognized as liability in the books of guarantor as mentioned. Yeah, in direct assignment, if you are providing corporate guarantee, then you have to totally matlab, altogether evaluate the way which I told that for securitization transaction. In that also we are providing credit enhancement, which is nothing but a kind of guarantee. So we first have to evaluate whether we can de-recognize this asset or not. So corporate guarantee in direct assignments we have to consider with a view that whether risk and rewards have been transferred substantially or not. So the corporate guarantee has been provided. In that case, I can say that we have not transferred risk and reward substantially. In that case, we altogether cannot de-recognize that particular asset. But in direct assignment, I don't think so that there will be a corporate guarantee part. Generally, it is there in securitization transaction, which is called as credit enhancement, and that is why we are not de-recognizing assets in securitization transaction. Now, with the current moratorium offered by the RBI to all the borrowers, will ECL provision required to be? Yes. So in this case, there is a specific guidance under Ind AS 109 that whether if you expect any changes in the future cash flow, so cash flow modifications are there. In that case, you have to revalue the amount gross carrying value of the particular financial asset or liability by discounting the future cash flows with using the original EIR. So for example, in my example, discussed that EIR was 10.27 percentage. So now, after 5 years, after certain period, there is a relaxation of 3 months that you said that bank have been provided to me. So now I have to recalculate my closing value based on all the future cash flows which I am going to incur. So मेरे future payments को मुझे discount करना है 10.27% से, और जो मेरी present value आई, वो present value I have to compare with the actual value in my books. Whatever difference is there, I have to recognize into P&L, एंड जो नई प्रेजेंट वैल्यू है वो मुझे कैरी करनी है ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ नेक्स्ट रिमेनिंग टेन्योर ऑफ द लोन. Okay, so another question is whether ECL is to be shown later if someone become recoverable and provision was made in books under IGAP. So here you have to create a differential provision. That is true that if you have already created provision under IGAP, for example, on 100 rupee data, you have already created provision of 60 rupees under IGAP. But now, as per Ind AS, you are required to create a provision of 70. Then the remaining difference, 10 rupee provision is only to be created as a part of Ind AS adjustment. That 60 rupees is going to get carry forward. So only remaining 10 rupees provision, which is the differential amount between IGAP and Ind AS, that you have to create as a part of gap adjustment. Okay, so how to calculate effective rate of interest when interest rate is variable? So in case of variable interest rate, that floating interest rate itself is considered as an EIR. There is also guidance in under 109 for that also, that every period end, if for example my interest rate is based on some bank's base rate plus so and so percentage. For example, I have taken a loan from XYZ bank and the rate of interest is XYZ bank's base rate plus 3%. Quarter they are going to change that their base rate, and based on that my interest rate is changed. So that change of interest rate itself shows that EIR calculation has been properly taken care. So in that case, I don't think so any adjustment will come, provided you do not have any transaction cost. If you have any transaction cost, then that transaction cost you have to amortize over a period of time by considering the relevant amortization method, because the for the purpose of calculating EIR, that floating rate itself is considered as an EIR because it gets changed over a period of time. So that particular aspect has been taken care of. Okay. Okay, what's the impact on FS of NBFC post Ind AS? It will be huge, or it will be depend on the company and its nature. Definitely, it will be depend on the transactions which company are entering into. So companies the company just have the loans, so EIR accounting की ही impact आएगी. if they also have the investments and the securitization assignment transactions, then in that case financial guarantee. So जैसे जैसे नेचर ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शन कंपनी के ये जो डिफरेंसेस वाले ज्यादा हो गए उतनी इम्पैक्ट ज्यादा आएगी। अगर कंपनी छोटे पाए मतलब छोटे बिजनेस में है और नॉर्मल लोन का ही उनका बिजनेस है, लोन लेना और देना, then in that case only EIR impact will become. But अगर दूसरे और business, so based on the nature of the transaction or the business activity in which company is operating, this impact will be determined. We cannot say that what kind of activity actual impact will be there. In slide 7, why the Ind AS is not applicable, as it's a subsidiary of the company requiring to prepare Ind AS. Okay, so Ind AS is not applicable because we cannot voluntarily adopt it. But if my parent is in a is the, for example, I take an example that if my parent is a NBFC, then in any case I have to follow Ind AS, because under phase 1 and phase 2 criteria it has been mentioned that your parent is NBFC and it is and Ind AS are applicable to them. It is applicable to subsidiary, JV, associate also. But in case, for example, my parent is not an NBFC, it is a manufacturing company or whatever you say, and Ind AS is applicable to them. But as a subsidiary, I am in NBFC, but it is not applicable to me under those phase 1 or phase 2 criteria. So in that case, for the purpose of consolidation of my parent company, I have to prepare Ind AS accounts. But for routine reporting or regular reporting, I have to follow IGAAP only for the purpose of preparing financial statement. So it will be a case only where my financial where my holding company is not an NBFC and I am an NBFC, or in a reverse way, I am a holding company but my subsidiary is not an NBFC. I think all the questions we have considered. Let me just I think we have considered all the question. If anything is remained, this is okay. What FVT OCI that will be reclassified to PNL not be? Okay, so there are specific transactions for FVT OCI which will be reclassified to PNL, which will not be reclassified to PNL. For example, this actual gain loss we discussed, that will not be reclassified to PNL. But there are certain adjustments, for example, derivative accounting, we can say. So in that case, if you have parked your gain loss in FVT OCI, that will be reclassified to PNL whenever your hedge item is going to affect your PNL. So there is a specific list. If you refer a part 3 guidance note, there are cases that this type of transactions have been listed out, that which kind of transaction will be reclassified to PNL and which kind of transaction which will not be reclassified to PNL. So you can refer the guidance note also. In that also there is a list of this kind of transaction. I think everything has been covered, Virag. So if you can. I think almost all the queries have been considered, but we have one WhatsApp group where Virag will add you guys. If you have any further doubts, we can discuss over that group also, and I am also available on this number, and email ID is there on your screen, so you guys can contact me anytime. I think now over to you, Virag.
Yes, Jainam bhai.
So we have one WhatsApp group of all the attendees, na?
Yes, yes, we are having one WhatsApp group, so
So
members
if
can
they
ask
have
their
any further doubts, yes.
yes. So just to share you that many members has already appreciated in that group, and they have written that today's seminar was really good and beneficial for members, and almost around 10 people has appreciated. So once again, thank you very much for joining us and gracing the today's event. You have covered all the aspects of non-banking financials company in all prospectus of India's. So I want to mention thank you, and I want to mention sorry. Unfortunately, my mic was on, and it's got inconvenience to all the members. So I'm extremely sorry and apologize for the that Sam. And now I request TC Bafna sir to give a vote of thanks to Jainam Shah and close the today's webinar.
Thank you, Jana bhai. Thank you for this good speak for this NBFC accounting standard, and very nice, very
Thank you, sir,
informative.
for providing
Thank
me
you.
opportunity to share my views.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana
Okay,
bhai. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
thank you. So now we are
Okay.
closing.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you, Jainam
Yeah,
bhai.
Thank you so much,
thank you.
all
Thank
the
you, Vivek.
participants.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Bapna, sir. Thank you.
Thank
So
you, bhai.
tomorrow we will meet at 6 o'clock same time. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.